When my daughter announced I was too embarrassing for her birthday party, I laughed, canceled a check, and walked out. That night, I had 52 missed calls. The sound of my daughter's laughter used to be the sweetest music in the world to me. But standing in her living room that Thursday afternoon, holding a check for $25,000 while listening to her mock me to her friends on speakerphone, it sounded like breaking glass. I had arrived early to surprise her with the deposit for her dream birthday venue, the Heritage Ballroom at the Westfield Country Club where I had been a founding member for 20 years. But instead I heard her telling her friends that I was too embarrassing to invite to her 30th birthday party because I would, probably show up in one of those ridiculous ties her late mother used to buy me and bore everyone with stories about my humble beginnings. The women on the phone laughed along with her, and I heard Marcus's sister Melissa say something about new money always showing, and that is when I saw my son-in-law standing in the doorway to the garage, his face pale as he realized I had heard everything, and without saying a word, I walked into the living room where Emma sat with her phone, looked her directly in the eyes as her face shifted from amusement to shock and slowly, deliberately tore the check into pieces that fluttered onto her marble coffee table like snow, before I turned and walked out, leaving behind the bottle of 1994 Chateau d'Yquem I had brought to celebrate the year she was born. The drive home was strange because I felt nothing at first, just a peculiar numbness as if I was watching someone else's life fall apart. But then Catherine's favorite song came on the radio, the one we danced to at our wedding and the one Emma had begged me to teach her for her own wedding day. And suddenly I had to pull over because my hands were shaking not with sadness but with a cold fury I had never felt toward my own child. This was not the first time Emma had pushed me aside since marrying Marcus 2 years ago, as there had been the Thanksgiving where his mother commented that I dressed like I still worked construction, despite my tailored suit, the Christmas morning when Emma suggested I should not come because Marcus's family found my stories tedious, and the promotion party where she asked me not to mention that I owned the building where Marcus's company leased their offices. But each time I had swallowed my pride and told myself she was just trying to fit into her new world of old money and established families who looked down on someone like me who had built his fortune from nothing. But calling me embarrassing, while I stood in her home with a check that represented 3 months of planning for her perfect birthday surprise, was the moment I realized my daughter had become someone her mother would not recognize, someone who valued the approval of strangers over the love of the father who had given her everything. My phone started ringing before I even reached my driveway. First Emma, then Marcus, then numbers I did not recognize, which I assumed were his parents, but I turned it off and poured myself a scotch, sitting in Catherine's favorite chair and wondering what she would say about all this. Catherine had been gone for 12 years now, taken by cancer when Emma was barely 18, and I had promised her on her deathbed that I would give our daughter everything she needed to be happy. But I wondered now if I had confused giving her everything with teaching her anything about values, loyalty, and remembering where you came from. The construction crew I started with would laugh if they heard someone call me embarrassing, considering I still had beers with them every month and never forgot that. Without their hard work and trust when I could barely make payroll, there would be no fortune for Emma to be ashamed of now. That evening I made 3 phone calls that would change everything, though Emma would not know it for days. The first was to the country club, canceling the entire birthday reservation including the Heritage Ballroom, the band I had tracked down from her college days, the portrait artist who had painted our family when she was 10, and the surprise appearance by her childhood best friend Sarah, whom I had been flying in from Australia. The second call was to my lawyer James, asking him to meet me first thing in the morning to execute the separation protocol we had discussed as a contingency, but I had never thought I would use. The third was to my accountant with instructions to begin unwinding the complex web of financial support I had built around Emma's life without her knowledge. From the co-signed mortgage on her house to the quiet arrangements that had secured her position at the prestigious art gallery, to the business connections that kept Marcus's company afloat. Each call was professional and brief, but together they would systematically remove the invisible safety net I had spent years weaving around my daughter's life. By the time I turned my phone back on at midnight, there were 52 missed calls and dozens of text messages ranging from Emma's initial anger to confusion to desperate apologies, but I did not respond to any of them. Instead, I went through old photo albums, finding the pictures from the birthday parties she now called gaudy and embarrassing. The ones where Catherine was still alive and Emma's face glowed with genuine joy, rather than the practiced smile she wore now for her society friends. There was one from her 16th birthday where I had rented an entire carnival for our backyard, because she mentioned once that she had never been to one, and in the photo she is hugging me while wearing a World's Best Dad t-shirt over her party dress. And Catherine had taken the picture saying we should remember this moment, because this is what love looks like. 6 months later, Catherine was gone, and I threw myself into work and providing for Emma, private schools and European vacations, and a car at 16 in college without loans and seed money for 3 failed business ventures, never saying no because I thought that was what love meant. But now I understood I had confused love with indulgence. The next morning brought a cascade of consequences that Emma had not anticipated. The mortgage company called her about the change in co-signer status, explaining that without my guarantee, she and Marcus did not qualify for their current loan and would need to refinance or sell within 90 days. The country club informed her that her membership had been revoked since it was linked to my sponsorship. And no, Marcus's family membership did not extend to spouses. Marcus's company received notice that their largest client, worth 40% of their revenue, was moving their account effective immediately, as the introduction I had made included a personal guarantee clause that was now void. The art gallery director, my old friend Robert, whom I had known since we were both struggling in our 20s, called Emma to discuss restructuring her position from curator to part-time assistant, explaining that the gallery's partnership with my foundation required reconsideration. Each action was perfectly legal. Every contract included provisions I had inserted for protection but hoped never to use, like a parent keeping training, wheels in the garage long after their child claims they can ride alone. Emma's voicemails evolved throughout that day from indignation to panic to something that sounded like genuine fear. Dad, there must be some misunderstanding. Became, the bank says we have 90 days, which became, Marcus is having a breakdown, which finally became just tears and please. Daddy, I'm sorry, I'm so sorry, please call me back. But I had learned something in building my business from one truck and a dream to a company worth millions, which is that when someone shows you who they have become, you believe them the first time, not the 52nd. Marcus showed up at my office that afternoon, his usual swagger replaced by desperation, his expensive suit wrinkled as if he had slept in it. You don't understand what you've done, he said, slumping into the chair across from my desk. My family is pulling their support because of the business situation. They say I can't even manage my wife's family, and Emma hasn't stopped crying since yesterday. I looked at this man who had helped turn my daughter against me, who had stood silent while his family mocked my background, who had benefited from my connections while allowing his wife to call me embarrassing, and I felt nothing but a cold clarity. Marcus, I said quietly, I gave you both everything except the one thing that mattered, which was respect. I cannot buy that, and apparently I cannot earn it either. Your family thinks I am new money, not good enough for their circles despite my wealth exceeding theirs, and you let them think that, while taking my money and my connections. Emma thinks I am embarrassing because I worked construction, because I tell stories about building something from nothing, because I wear ties her mother picked out that I kept wearing after she died because they remind me of her. You both decided I was good enough to fund your life, but not good enough to be part of it. So now you can have the life you can afford on your own, without the embarrassment of my involvement. That evening, Emma came to the house using her key, and I found her in Catherine's garden, sitting by the rose bushes her mother had planted the year before she got sick, crying in a way I had not seen since the funeral. I ruined everything, she said without looking at me. Mom would hate who I've become. I can hear her voice in my head asking me when I became so cruel, so shallow, so ungrateful. She was right, Catherine would have been horrified. But she also would have forgiven Emma instantly because that was who she was, the better person between us, the one who knew how to love unconditionally while I only knew how to provide and protect. Your mother would love you anyway, I replied, standing at a distance because I could not bring myself to comfort her yet. That's the difference between her and me. She was the better person. I'm just embarrassing. The words hung between us like a blade, and Emma flinched as if I had struck her. Dad, I didn't mean it. I was just trying to fit in with Marcus's family. They have all these rules and expectations, and they made me feel like everything about where I came from was wrong, like I had to erase it all to belong with them. I wanted to tell her that belonging with people who required you to abandon your family was not belonging at all. But instead I just said, "You succeeded then. You erased me quite effectively. Now you can live with the consequences of that choice." What Emma did not know, what I had planned to tell her at the birthday party that would never happen, was that Catherine had left her own inheritance in trust. Not money from me, but from her family's old estate. Things I had never touched because they were meant for Emma when she turned 30. Her grandmother's jewelry worth more than the house Emma lived in. First editions of books Catherine had collected since childhood. Paintings that had been in storage for over a decade. And most importantly, a letter Catherine had written for Emma's 30th birthday. Knowing she would not be there to celebrate it, I had been the trustee, waiting for the right moment to reveal this final gift from her mother. But now I wondered if that moment would ever come. If Emma had become too much the person her mother would not recognize, to deserve the treasures her mother had left. Behind the Emma Catherine Foundation went forward, but with a different purpose than I had originally planned. Instead of a vanity charity for Emma to run, gaining her entrance into the philanthropic circles she so desperately wanted to join, it became a scholarship fund for first-generation college students from working-class families. Kids who would not be embarrassed by where they came from, but would instead wear it as a badge of honor. The announcement made the business pages, and several of Marcus's family friends called to congratulate me on such a worthy cause, the irony not lost on anyone who knew the situation. Emma would read about her own name foundation in the society pages she loved so much, knowing she had no part in it, knowing it was helping kids who were everything she now pretended not to be. The country club board meeting the following month was interesting because, as a founding member, I had certain privileges, including the ability to sponsor or revoke sponsorships. Several members approached me about Emma and Marcus's situation, having heard through the inevitable gossip that their membership had been revoked. "Such a shame," Mrs. Pemberton said with false sympathy that barely concealed her delight, as she had never approved of Emma despite accepting invitations to every party we had thrown. Perhaps they were not quite ready for the responsibilities of membership. I simply nodded and changed the subject. But I noticed how quickly those who had laughed along with Emma's comments about me were now distancing themselves from her, fair-weather friends who disappeared the moment the weather turned. 3 months later, the house was sold in a short sale that barely covered the mortgage, and Emma and Marcus moved to a rental apartment on the other side of town. Marcus had been downsized from his company after losing the major client, taking a position with a smaller firm at half his previous salary. Emma lost the gallery position entirely when Robert apologetically explained that without the foundation's support, they could not afford to keep her on even part-time. She eventually found work as a substitute teacher at a public school, the only position she could get without connections or recommendations, a humbling fall from the curator of a prestigious gallery to managing classroom chaos for $100 a day. But something else was happening during those months, something I watched from a distance through mutual acquaintances and the occasional glimpse when our paths crossed in town. Emma was changing, or perhaps returning to who she had been before Marcus and his world had reshaped her. I heard from Roberto at the Italian restaurant where Catherine and I had our first date that Emma had come in alone one evening and asked if he still had the table in the corner where she had taken her first steps as a baby, and she had sat there for hours with a glass of wine, looking through old photos on her phone. The owner of the hardware store mentioned she had come in looking for gardening supplies, saying she wanted to learn how to grow roses like her mother had. These small things reached me like messages in bottles, evidence of an internal shift I was not ready to acknowledge. The Christmas card that arrived 6 months after the birthday incident was different from the glossy, impersonal cards of previous years with their professional family photos and printed signatures. This one was simple, handwritten on plain cardstock. "Dad, I'm learning to be someone you and Mom wouldn't be embarrassed by. Maybe someday you'll let me prove it. Love, Emma." Inside was a photo that stopped me cold. Emma volunteering at a construction skills program for at-risk youth, wearing one of my old company t-shirts I did not even know she had kept. Her hands dirty and her smile genuine in a way I had not seen in years. She was teaching kids to read blueprints, the accompanying note explained, using the skills she had learned all those Saturdays when she would come to job sites with me as a child, before she learned to be ashamed of those memories. I stood by Catherine's grave on what would have been our 35th wedding anniversary, holding Emma's card and talking to the headstone as I often did when I needed guidance. I don't know if I did the right thing, I told the carved granite that bore her name. You always knew how to forgive instantly, to love without conditions, to see the best in people even when they showed you their worst. I only knew how to provide and protect, and when I couldn't protect Emma from becoming someone neither of us would recognize, I cut her off like a diseased branch to save the tree. Was that strength or cruelty? Was it necessary or just vindictive? Would you have done the same, or would you have found another way? The wind rustled through the roses I had planted around her grave, the same varieties from our garden that Emma was now apparently trying to grow herself, and I took that as a sign that maybe, perhaps, it was time for something to shift. That evening I made one phone call to Sarah in Australia, Emma's childhood best friend who had been devastated when I explained why Emma had not been at the birthday party I had flown her in for. "Sarah, it's Mr. T," I said when she answered despite the time difference. "I think it's time you and Emma reconnected. She needs someone who remembers who she really is, who she was before she lost her way." Sarah was quiet for a moment before saying, "I never stopped missing her, Mr. T. The Emma I knew would never have treated you that way. But people change, and sometimes they change back. Send me her number. I'll call her." It was not forgiveness exactly, not yet, but it was a bridge. The kind Catherine would have built immediately, but that took me months to even consider. Sometimes the most embarrassing thing a father can do is love his child enough to let them fail, to let them fall, and to hope they find their way back to who they are meant to be. Sometimes the greatest gift is not what you give, but what you take away, forcing them to stand on their own feet and remember what really matters. I thought about all those birthday parties Emma now found embarrassing, the carnival in the backyard, the petting zoo, the time I rented an entire movie theater for her and her friends, and I realized that the embarrassment was not in the excess but in the love behind it, the unrestrained, unashamed love of a father who did not know any other way to show it, except through grand gestures and open arms. A year passed before the 53rd call came, the one I finally answered. It was a Tuesday evening and I was in Catherine's garden, pruning the roses that had grown wild and beautiful in the years since she had planted them. "Dad?" Emma's voice was different, older somehow, weighted with something that might have been wisdom earned through loss. "I need to tell you something. I'm pregnant, and I want my child to know their grandfather, the real one, not the edited version I tried to create for Marcus's family. I want them to know the man who built something from nothing, who loved Mom so much he kept her garden alive, who worked 18-hour days to give me opportunities he never had. The embarrassing one who cares too much and shows up with ridiculous carnival rides and tells the same stories about the old days, because those stories matter. Because they're our history, our truth." I sat down on the bench Catherine and I had placed there 20 years ago, phone pressed to my ear, listening to my daughter breathe on the other end of the line. "I've left Marcus," she continued, and I could hear her voice strengthen. Not because of the money or the situation, but because I finally saw what I had become with him, what I had given up to fit into his world. I'm living in a small apartment now, teaching full-time at the public school, and you know what? I'm happier than I've been in years. My students don't care that I used to work at a gallery, or that I lost my country club membership. They care that I show up, that I teach them with patience, that I tell them stories about my dad who started with nothing and built something amazing. I tell them about you all the time, Dad. I'm not embarrassed anymore. I'm proud. The silence stretched between us, but it was not uncomfortable. It was full of possibility, of potential reconciliation, of the chance to rebuild something that had been broken but perhaps not irreparably destroyed. "Come to dinner Sunday," I finally said, my voice rougher than I intended. "Roberto's, our usual table." The line was quiet for a moment before she responded. "Our usual table," and I could hear her crying, but it was different from the desperate tears of a year ago. These were tears of relief, of gratitude, of coming home. "I'll be there, Daddy, I'll be there." That Sunday I arrived at Roberto's early, sitting at the corner table where Emma had taken her first steps, where Catherine and I had celebrated every anniversary until she got too sick to go out, where I had proposed to Catherine over plates of homemade pasta and house wine that tasted like joy. Roberto himself, now in his 70s, patted my shoulder as he passed, understanding without words what this dinner meant. When Emma walked in, she was different. Not just in appearance, though the designer clothes had been replaced with simple, comfortable pieces, but in the way she carried herself, no longer trying to be someone else, no longer performing for an audience that would never truly accept her. She sat down across from me, and for a moment we just looked at each other, cataloging the changes a year had brought. "I brought something," she said, pulling out a worn envelope from her purse. "I've been carrying this everywhere, waiting for the right time." She handed it to me, and I recognized Catherine's handwriting immediately, my name on the front in her careful script. "It was in Mom's things," Emma explained, "the ones I kept in storage because Marcus thought they were too sentimental to display. I've been going through them all, remembering who she was, who we were as a family. This one is for you, for when you needed to remember something," she said. I opened the letter with hands that trembled slightly, and Catherine's voice seemed to rise from the page. "My dearest love, if you're reading this, it means you're doubting yourself, probably about Emma. You two are so alike, both stubborn, both proud, both willing to burn bridges rather than admit you're hurt. But here's what I know. She will find her way back because she's your daughter and my daughter, and that combination of hard-headed determination and deep love will eventually win. When it does, when she comes back, remember that the strongest bridges are built from both sides. Don't make her build alone. Love, Catherine." Emma was crying openly now, not caring who saw, and I reached across the table to take her hand for the first time in over a year. "Tell me about my grandchild," I said, and her face transformed with a smile that was purely her, not practiced or performed, but genuine and bright. "Well," she began, "if it's a boy, I want to name him after you, and if it's a girl, Catherine, of course. And I want them to grow up knowing where they come from. All of it. The construction sites and the country clubs, the struggles and the successes, the embarrassing birthday parties and the quiet moments in Mom's garden." We talked for hours that night, through multiple courses that Roberto kept bringing without being asked, through coffee and dessert and glasses of wine that turned into water when Emma remembered she was pregnant. She told me about the teaching job, how difficult but rewarding it was, how she had started a program where parents came to talk about their careers, and she was hoping I would come speak to her students. "They would love to hear your stories," she said, and there was no irony in it, no hidden meaning, just genuine enthusiasm. "The ones about starting with one truck, about learning to read blueprints at night school, about building the first building with your own hands. Those stories matter, Dad. I forgot that for a while, but I remember now." I told her about the foundation, how it had helped 17 students so far, kids who reminded me of myself at that age, hungry and determined and unashamed of working with their hands. "I want to be involved," she said immediately. "Not as some figurehead or for society page photos, but really involved. These kids are like my students. They need to know someone believes in them, someone who understands where they're coming from." It was the first time since Catherine's death that I felt like I was talking to my daughter rather than the stranger she had become, and I realized that perhaps the year of distance had been necessary for both of us, for her to remember who she was, and for me to learn to let her fail and find her own way back. As we prepared to leave, Roberto brought out a small cake with a single candle, setting it between us with a wink. "For the birthday that wasn't," he said simply, and Emma looked at me with surprise. "You remembered," she whispered, and I nodded because how could I forget my daughter's birthday even when she had forgotten who I was? "Make a wish," I told her, and she closed her eyes for a long moment before blowing out the candle. "I wished for time," she said, opening her eyes to look directly at me. "Time to make things right. Time to know you again. Time for my child to know their grandfather. Time to become someone Mom would be proud of." The months that followed were slow and careful, rebuilding a relationship that had been shattered but not destroyed. Emma came to the house every Sunday for dinner, and we would cook together the way we had when she was young, before Marcus and his world of takeout and restaurant reservations. She started working in Catherine's garden, learning through trial and error how to care for the roses, and I would find her there sometimes when I came home, hands in the dirt, talking to the plants the way her mother used to. She attended the foundation's fundraising gala, not as my daughter trying to make connections, but as a volunteer who spent the evening talking to the scholarship recipients about their dreams and challenges. When Marcus tried to reconcile, showing up at her apartment with flowers and promises that his family would accept her now, she called me from her car afterward. laughing and crying simultaneously. He actually said they would lower their standards for me, she said, disbelief in her voice. Like I should be grateful for the chance to be considered barely acceptable. How did I ever think that was love? I wanted to tell her that sometimes we lose ourselves so gradually we don't notice until we're completely gone. But instead I just said, "You know better now." And she agreed. "I do. Dad, I really do." The baby arrived on a rainy Thursday morning. 2 weeks early and impatient like his mother had always been, Emma called me from the hospital, exhausted but exhilarated, and said, "Come meet your grandson, Grandpa. Come meet little Thomas Catherine Parker." She had given him my name and his grandmother's name and her own last name, not Marcus's, a choice that spoke volumes about who she had decided to be. When I held him for the first time, this tiny perfect person who would grow up knowing exactly where he came from and why he should be proud of it, I thought about Catherine and how she would have loved this moment, this completion of a circle that had seemed irreparably broken. Emma returned to teaching 6 weeks later, stronger and more determined than ever, balancing single motherhood with a grace that reminded me of Catherine. She moved into the small house 3 blocks from mine, accepting my help with the down payment but insisting on making the mortgage payments herself. "I need to do this right," she explained. "I need to know I can stand on my own feet, even if you're there to catch me if I fall." The nursery was painted the same soft yellow as her childhood room had been, and she hung the portraits from her birthday parties that she had once called embarrassing, now seeing them as treasures of a childhood filled with love. The first time she brought little Thomas to a job site, wearing a tiny hard hat I had specially made, the construction crew that had known Emma since she was born welcomed her back like a prodigal daughter returned. "Remember when you used to come here with your dad?" Big Mike asked, the same man who had taught her to read blueprints when she was 7. "You said you were going to build the tallest building in the world." Emma smiled, adjusting Thomas in his carrier, and replied, "I'm building something better now. I'm building a good life, an honest life, one where we remember where we came from." The country club incident became a story we could eventually laugh about, though it took time. "Can you imagine their faces?" Emma said one evening as we watched Thomas crawl around Catherine's garden. "When they realized I couldn't afford the dinner I'd booked." She had heard through former friends that her birthday disaster had become legendary gossip, the fall from grace that everyone discussed in whispers over champagne. "Let them talk," she said with a shrug that showed how far she had come. "I'd rather be here with you and Thomas and Mom's roses than in that ballroom with people who only liked me when I was pretending to be someone else." Sarah visited from Australia when Thomas turned 1, and watching Emma with her oldest friend, seeing them laugh about shared memories and dreams, I realized that the real Emma had never actually disappeared. She had just been buried under layers of pretense and the desperate need to belong somewhere she was never meant to be. "Your dad saved you," Sarah told Emma one evening when they thought I couldn't hear. "By letting you fall, by refusing to enable the person you'd become, he saved the real you." Emma's response was quiet but clear. "He did what Mom would have done, just in his own way. She would have loved me through it. He loved me enough to let me hate him until I could love myself. Again." The Foundation's 5th anniversary gala was held in the same Heritage Ballroom where Emma's 30th birthday party was supposed to have been, and this time she was there, not as a guest trying to make connections but as the Director of Student Services, a position she had earned through a year of volunteer work and genuine dedication. She spoke to the crowd about second chances, about the importance of remembering where you come from, about the danger of being embarrassed by the very things that shaped you into who you are. "My father built something from nothing," she said, looking at me across the room. "And for a while I was ashamed of that, as if starting from the bottom was something to hide rather than something to celebrate. I forgot that every building he constructed, every business he built, every opportunity he created was an act of love, a way of saying to the world and to me that anything is possible if you're willing to work for it." Marcus appeared one last time, at a coffee shop where Emma and I were having lunch with Thomas, now 3 and chattering about everything he could see. He looked diminished somehow, his expensive suit replaced with off-the-rack clothes, his confidence replaced with something desperate. "Emma, please," he began, but she held up her hand. "Marcus, I'm not angry anymore," she said calmly. "But we were wrong for each other. You needed someone who fit your world, and I needed to remember that I already had a world. one built with love and sacrifice and hard work. I wish you well, but that's all I wish." He looked at me then, perhaps hoping for anger he could argue with, but I simply nodded and turned my attention back to Thomas, who was building towers with sugar packets, already showing the builder's instinct that ran in our family. Time moved forward as it always does, and the sharp edges of that terrible birthday week softened into something we could examine without bleeding. Emma and I developed new traditions, Sunday dinners and Tuesday lunches and Saturday mornings at job sites, where Thomas learned to read blueprints like his mother had, like I had taught her before she forgot it was something to be proud of. The embarrassing father who told stories about the old days became Grandpa Tom, who had the best stories. According to Thomas and his little sister Catherine, who arrived 2 years later, named for the grandmother she would never meet but would know through the garden we all tended together. On Emma's 35th birthday, I threw her a party that was everything she had once called embarrassing. A carnival in the backyard of my house with a Ferris wheel and cotton candy, and a petting zoo that made Thomas shriek with delight. Emma wore the same World's Best Dad t-shirt from her 16th birthday, now faded and soft over her dress, and when she hugged me in front of everyone, not caring who saw or what they thought, she whispered, "This is perfect. Dad, this is who we really are." The country club crowd wasn't invited, but the construction crew was there, and Roberto and his family, and the scholarship recipients from the foundation, and Sarah, who had moved back from Australia to be closer to the friends she had missed. And it was loud and chaotic and absolutely perfect. That night, after the guests had gone home and the kids were asleep, Emma and I sat in Catherine's garden, now our garden, watching fireflies dance among the roses. "I'm sorry," she said suddenly, though we had moved past apologies long ago. Not just for what I said, but for who I became. For forgetting everything you and Mom taught me about what really matters. I thought about telling her that apologies weren't necessary anymore, that we had both learned and grown from that painful time. But instead I told her something more important. "Your mother wrote me a letter before she died, one I didn't find until after you'd come back. She said you would find your way because you were our daughter, stubborn and proud, but also capable of great love." She was right, as always. Emma smiled. The same smile she'd had as a child when Catherine would read her bedtime stories, before the world got complicated, and she lost her way trying to find where she belonged. "Do you think she would be proud of who I've become?" she asked, and I didn't hesitate. "She would be proud of who you've always been, Emma. You just forgot for a while." We both did. But the important thing is that we remembered, and we found our way back to each other. The roses rustled in the evening breeze, and I could almost hear Catherine's voice in them, saying what she always said when Emma or I would doubt ourselves. Love isn't about being perfect. It's about showing up, especially when it's hard, especially when you've failed, especially when you're embarrassed. That's when love matters most. Looking back now, I realize that the 52 missed calls that night weren't just Emma trying to apologize or explain or salvage her birthday party. They were the beginning of her journey back to herself. Each unanswered ring a step toward remembering who she really was beneath the pretense and performance. And my silence, as painful as it was for both of us, was necessary too. A space for her to hear her own voice instead of the chorus of expectations that had drowned it out. We had both been lost in different ways. Her in trying to become someone she wasn't. Me in enabling it by giving her everything except the truth about what really mattered. The embarrassing father she had been ashamed of turned out to be exactly the father she needed. Not the one who would smooth every path and pay every bill and accept every slight, but the one who loved her enough to let her fail, to let her fall, to let her find her own way back to the values we had tried to teach her, and she became the daughter I had always known was there. Underneath the designer clothes and society ambitions, the girl who had once worn a World's Best Dad t-shirt over her party dress and meant it, who had taken her first steps in a little Italian restaurant and would teach her own children to walk that same path with pride, not embarrassment. If you're watching this story unfold from wherever you are in the world, whether from a mansion or a small apartment, whether you're a parent struggling with a child who's lost their way, or a child who's realized they've forgotten where they came from, remember that it's never too late to rebuild those bridges, to remember what really matters, to stop being embarrassed by love that shows up in carnival rides and construction site visits and stories told 1,000 times, because they're the stories that made us who we are. Sometimes the most valuable thing a parent can give their child isn't money or connections or a smooth path through life. but the strength to stand on their own feet, and the wisdom to know that where you come from isn't something to hide, but something to honor. Thank you for joining me on this journey of loss and redemption, of pride and humility, of a father and daughter who had to lose each other to find their way back to what really mattered. If this story touched your heart, if it reminded you of your own family or your own struggles with identity and belonging, please take a moment to like this video and share it with someone who might need to hear that it's never too late to come home. Never too late to stop being embarrassed by the people who love you most. Never too late to remember that the most embarrassing thing about love is often just how much of it there is, overflowing and unconditional, and waiting for you to come back to yourself. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more stories that explore the complex, beautiful, sometimes painful relationships that make us human. And leave a comment below sharing where you're watching from, and whether you've ever had to choose between fitting in and being true to who you really are. Remember, the people who truly matter will never be embarrassed by your authentic self, and those who are embarrassed were never your people to begin with.